All right, today we're going to break down a pretty wild scenario from our source material. It's a story that kicks off with a military operation, but quickly spirals into a full-blown crisis in the global silver market. And maybe, just maybe, it was all part of a geopolitical master plan.
So let's set the scene. The headlines are all screaming about regime change in Venezuela. But the real story, according to this analysis, wasn't on the front page. It was buried in inventory reports. While everyone was watching the political drama unfold, something huge was happening inside the country's central bank vaults. And this number, well, it shows you the sheer scale of it. Get this. During a 6-hour blackout, nearly all of Venezuela's physical silver reserves, we're talking 847 tons, just vanished. That's 99.6% of their entire stash. This isn't just a few bars missing. It's the biggest physical silver heist in modern history. And that's the key pivot here, right? The public saw a political story. But behind the scenes, the financial world was dealing with something else entirely. A critical, physical commodity just got wiped off the map, and at the absolute worst possible time.
So you might be wondering, why does one country's silver matter so much? Well, because it was one of the last physical props holding up an incredibly fragile system. And that brings us to what the source calls the paper trap.
To really get this, you have to understand this one concept. Paper silver is basically just an IOU. It's a promise on a screen that says you own silver. The problem, as our source points out, is when the number of promises vastly outweighs the amount of actual physical metal sitting in a vault somewhere. And the math here is, well, it's pretty alarming. On the day of this event, big banks were on the hook to deliver 212 million ounces of silver, but the main exchange, the COMEX, only had 128 million ounces of actual deliverable silver. So they were already short 84 million ounces before Venezuela's 27 million ounces went missing. The hole was already there. And this is what the source calls the leverage bomb. Some analysts were estimating that for every single ounce of real physical silver out there, there were up to 361 paper claims for it. Think about that for a second. It's like a giant game of musical chairs with one chair and 361 people. The whole system only works if nobody ever tries to actually sit down. Now, it's super important to understand. The Venezuela event wasn't the cause of the crisis, it was just the trigger. The system was already creaking under the strain. For 5 years straight, we were using more silver than we were mining. Why? Huge industrial demand from solar and EVs for sure, but also critical military consumption. This is a huge deal for U.S. industry. For example, a single Tomahawk missile needs about 500 ounces of silver. This isn't silver sitting in a vault, it's being used up, gone forever. And if you were looking for a giant flashing red light, this is it. Months before this all went down, the interest rate to borrow physical silver shot up to an insane 40%. A rate that high means only one thing. Someone, somewhere, was absolutely desperate to get their hands on physical metal, and they couldn't find it. The alarm bells were already ringing. Okay, so now we get into the most provocative part of this whole analysis. The source doesn't see this as a series of unlucky accidents. They lay out a case for a coordinated geopolitical attack designed to weaponize the silver market itself. Just look at how fast this all happens. It's bang, bang, bang. January 1st, China, the world's biggest refiner, basically shuts off the supply. 2 days later, Venezuela's reserves are gone. And this is all happening just 3 days before a major delivery deadline on the exchange. The timing, the source says, is just too perfect to be a coincidence. The narrative here really reads like a spy thriller. It alleges that while China was squeezing the supply of refined silver, Russia provided the heavy lifting. The cargo planes needed to physically get that silver out of Venezuela. It's framed as a calculated 1-2 punch aimed right at the Western financial system. And here's the result. The market just snapped in two. You had the paper price on a screen in New York saying silver was $71 an ounce. But at the same time, buyers in Japan trying to get their hands on actual physical bars were paying $130. That giant gap is the market screaming that the paper promises aren't real. So what was the ultimate goal, the checkmate move? According to this theory, it wasn't just about making a quick buck on silver. It was about forcing Western banks, who were now desperate for physical metal, to buy back the very same silver they'd just lost, but not with US dollars. This time, the price would be in rubles, or yuan. It's a direct shot at the dollar's global dominance, using a commodity as the weapon. So the trap is set. The banks are short, the physical metal has vanished. What happens now? Well, the source breaks down the potential fallout, and it's not pretty. The banks trapped in the situation basically have four ways out, and none of them are good. One, they can just pay cash instead of delivering the metal, which would shatter all confidence. Two, they can declare an act of God and just tear up the contracts. Three, the exchange could literally change the rules halfway through the game to save themselves. Or four, the nightmare scenario. One bank fails to deliver, and it starts a domino effect, a cascading default that could take down the whole system.
So as we start to wrap this up, the source argues that this whole incredible story, it isn't really just about silver. No, it's more like a modern fable with a much, much bigger lesson.
And this is really the heart of it all. Silver is just the canary in the coal mine here. This massive disconnect between paper promises and physical stuff, it exists in a lot of other markets too. This whole silver squeeze story is basically a giant warning shot about a fundamental weakness in our financial system. And that leaves us with one heck of a question to chew on. The whole narrative boils down to the difference between a promise on a computer screen and a real asset you can hold in your hand. It really forces you to ask, in a real crisis, what makes something valuable? Is it the price on a ticker, or is it the simple fact that it exists and you have it?